Thank you for organizing this interesting conference and for inviting me. So my presentation is based on a paper that we recently published, which is named Interpersonal Affective Touch in a Virtual World, Feeling the Social Presence of Others to Overcome Loneliness. So today I will not present some empirical data, but more a theoretical perspective. And I don't have a lot of answers, but I would like to ask a lot of questions, as in research we often do. So starting from a huge debate that is so open about virtual technology and whether they connect or disconnect people. And in particular, we focus on sensory processing, and as these technologies rely on vision and audition, but they scarcely involve in tactile interactions. So we ask whether missing the touch with others may increase the sense of loneliness and social disconnection. And if it's so, is it possible to bring interpersonal touch into virtual reality? As we know that this is an important means of connection. And this may represent a useful tool to create meaningful virtual social interactions. And finally, I would like also to discuss how to foster social connection among individuals who suffer from social isolation and social disconnection. So basically, we would like to provide a new perspective about the applicability of interpersonal affective touch in virtual reality as a driver of social presence, which may modulate the sense of self-other connection, especially for those people at risk of feeling lonely or unable to connect. So a quick overview, I would like to start presenting very briefly some neurophysiological properties of interpersonal affective touch, focusing in particular on the implication of touch in modulating social connection. Then I will discuss the role of interactive technology in contributing to or mitigating loneliness. And specifically, I propose that the inclusion of other sensory information, and specifically touch, may advance the virtual reality environment, launching new opportunities for social emotional communication. And finally, I will discuss some potential implications for autistic individuals, looking at some technological advances that can represent a new perspective to support more interactive communication. So starting from the neurophysiological properties of affective touch, I like to think touch as a bridge between the self and the others, because if we think about that, this is the first and most direct manner to connect between people. And when we think about touch, we have these two components. So usually we refer to the discriminative touch, so the components of touch that allowed us to explore the environment and to manipulate objects. This type of touch is mediated by the A-beta afferents, and they activate the primary somatosensory cortex. However, beside this discriminative dimension of touch, there is also a more affective and communicative functions of touch that are mediated by a specific type of fibers that are defined as C-tactile afferents that are selectively respond to slow touch, and critically they project directly to the posterior insula and to other social nodes, crucial nodes of the social brain network, which are involved in interoceptive and social processing. It suggests that affective touch may represent an essential link between the external sensory information and the internal affective states in order to support social affective abilities and social connection. So we are focusing on these emotional and motivational aspects of tactile exchanges. And there are also evidence that affective touch can mediate and shape social perceptions of others, for example, modulating the social appraisals of facial expression. So, if touch is, given the fact that touch is so important in social communication, but what could be the consequences of diminished opportunities of tactile social interactions? And we have some examples from experiences of physical and social deprivation, such as during polar expeditions and space flights. And there are data that support that the deprivation of physical contact produces psychological changes and also can impact cognitive abilities and brain plasticity. And another recent example that everyone experienced recently was the social distancing during the COVID-19 pandemic. And there are data that support how during this period people feel more lonely and a greater anxiety and crave for intimate tactile interactions. So indeed, affective touch can be very useful in cases of social exclusion, and it can reduce the feelings of social exclusion, leading to an increased sense of interpersonal connection and social support, with a stress protective effect that can increase the well-being. And what about the social interactions in virtual reality? So internet-based technology and virtual reality environments offer new opportunity of communication, overcoming physical distance. However, these technologies rely on vision and audition, but they scarcely involve tactile stimulation. And this may represent a limit that can diminishing the feeling of social presence and contribute to an increased sense of social disconnection and loneliness. So when we are talking about social interactions in virtual reality, an important component that we need to consider is the social presence, as also presented in previous talks. And we can define social presence as the sensation that other people are co-present and socially engaged with us within a technology-mediated environment, with the potential to establish an actual relationship. So the social presence is based on different aspects, starting from sensory aspects. So how many information can we derive from our sensory channels to have the feeling that the other person is there. But there are also other more high and cognitive aspects, such as the mutual understanding or the behavioral engagement, for example, the coagency, so when we are doing something in the same shared environment. So it's very important to consider that in virtual reality, social interactions occurs between representation of others made accessible to the senses via technological devices. So this means that virtual reality is not just a representation of the real world, but it's a different and a social space that has its own rules and also a potential to create a meaningful shared world and co-constructed relationships. So there is still this huge debate that is still open about the social consequences of virtual reality. And on one hand, there is enthusiasm and great expectations about virtual reality from people that look at virtual reality as an ultimate connection tool, which increases the realness of virtual communication, providing people with new opportunities to meet and communicate in spite of the physical distance. On the other hand, there are also some fear and resistance from people that see virtual reality as a pervasive means of communication that tend to disconnect people from their own body and also to reduce face-to-face opportunities to interact. So looking at the data, there are some confounding results, because some studies suggest that, for example, the use of social media seems to be associated with feelings of social isolation, but while other studies found that higher social media attitudes correlate with decrease of reported loneliness. So these confounding results suggest that other variables may mediate the effects of interactive technology on loneliness and social disconnection. And in particular, it has been shown that people believe that virtual platforms are a good way to connect with others is a more meaningful predictor of decreased loneliness than the frequency of social media use. So this indicates that the emotional benefits of virtual communication depend on perceiving a real connection and intimacy with the others. And this is very interesting, because affective touch can do that, and indeed tactile interaction may ameliorate the sense of social presence and intimacy between people interacting in virtual environments. If touch is so important, can we bring touch into virtual reality? Well, over the last years, researchers tried to bring touch into virtual experiences, designing and developing different devices that can encode, reproduce, and communicate interpersonal affective touch. And there are some evidence that suggests that indeed people in virtual reality communicate through touch. For example, when producing touch in virtual reality, participants have been shown to adjust the touch intensity according to the target. For example, they use less force for touching a virtual agent compared to an object, or they modulate the force according to the body part area that they are touching or the agent's sex. And they also modulate the cinematics to express different types of emotion through haptic devices. On the other hand, when receiving touch in virtual reality, participants reported an increased sense of social presence of virtual partners, indicating that mediated affective touch can modulate different aspects of social perception, physiological responses, and also increase trust and affection, helping connecting humans and virtual agents to foster pro-social behaviors. So all this evidence suggests that people implicitly use touch to communicate in virtual reality and virtual agents as they do in the real world. And given the fact that affective touch is closely linked to emotion, it suggests that this could be an important channel for and a fundamental in giving life to the virtual experience. So how can we use affective touch to increase social connection? The early sensory mechanisms and higher order cognitive and social abilities are bound together in shaping how people perceive their own bodies and interact with others. So there are a number of neurodevelopmental disorders in place concurrent distorted connection with the self and the others. In particular, there are evidence that suggests children with neurodevelopmental disorder are the most exposed to social exclusion, interpersonal disconnection, and loneliness, which is a predictor of mental health issues later in life. And I think this is very important because many times we focus on cognitive aspects, social emotional abilities, but the subjective feeling is overlooked. And we suggest that multisensory virtual environments may represent an innovative tool for assessing and training social abilities and a sense of social connection with the others, focusing on the role of interpersonal touch in enriching these mediated exchanges with crucial social and affective information. So considering the case of autism, some sensory aspects need to be considered. And in particular, autistic people has been shown to present unique and heterogeneous processing of tactile stimulation. They also show some atypical brain responses to both affective and non-affective touch, and reduce subjective pleasantness of affective touch. Moreover, as we just seen in the last presentation, there is also some delayed or reduced effect of visual tactile stimulation on the body itself. So it's very interesting to consider that there are also evidence about the benefits of massage and social touch. And in particular, it has been shown that autistic children stimulated with social touch show an improved sensory responses, self-regulatory abilities, and reduced symptom severity, with also some long-term benefits. How can we bring all these aspects into virtual reality? Virtual reality has recently used to reshape sensory and bodily experiences and social connection among different populations. However, when we are referring to autistic people, we need to consider some distinct sensory implications for autistic people in virtual reality. And in particular, there are evidence suggesting that they show a reduced sensitivity to visual manipulation of body itself, and increase reliance on somatosensory cues. This is very interesting because touch is part of this somatosensory information, and in particular, it is particularly powerful in connecting the self and the others. So I would like just to show some prototypes of tactile stimulation in virtual reality, and in particular, there are two tools, the Touch Me, which is a flexible vibrotactile motor array in a soft enclosure that provides shooting touch stimulation over an entire part of the body. And then there is also another tool which is called Squeeze Me, and it is a vest that stimulates holding. In particular, it provides momentary distributed pressure in ways that resemble an hug, and have been shown to lessen panic attacks in autistic children and to help manage aggressive behaviors. So these are just two examples about how tactile technologies can be implemented to help autistic people experiencing human contact through virtual stimulation of being touched. And this can help to explore innovative ways to adapt tactile stimulation to the individual's functioning and needs. Okay, so in conclusion, just to summarize some points, we have seen that affective touch is an essential means of social connection that may increase the sense of social presence and emotional support during virtual exchanges, thus preventing possible aversive effects of feeling lonely and disconnected from the others. One of the most challenging future directions for virtual reality field is the integration of interpersonal touch in virtual realities, critically supporting the human need to feel emotional and social connection through physical contact. And finally, the use of new technology that provide additional tactile stimulation could be high potential in supporting and reinforcing social abilities, offering unique opportunities to assess and manipulate individual profiles and sensory processing, affective tactile interaction, bodily self, and social skills. So I would like to thank all the network of my collaborators, and of course, thank you for your attention.